Shannon, you're doing the intro in the voice, right?
Not this time. I need to make a thing to where it will fit around my head. Because if you want this voice, it falls off. I need the other piece that goes across the top of my head.
Oh my god. Life in cyber. Shannon sucks. Let's do this.
Do with you, man? Are you even home lab, bro?
I do home lab. I've home labbed since I was 3.
Ooh.
Actually, I think Shannon is the one with the home lab, and it has the home lab the longest from all of us.
Yes.
Hold on. What labs were you doing at 3? I got to hear this.
3, I can't remember.
There goes.
But my original home lab started because I wanted to get Cody up and working because I had a vast diary of backed up media.
I think we could stop there.
I think that was back in LimeWire days. I think we're past statute of limitations. We're good.
It's a LimeWire.
Yeah, whatever, dude.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, home labbing. What a fun topic. So most of people who get in IT love to tinker and like to play with shit at home. And sometimes we need a place to play that's safe. Home lab.
Yes. Mine started with an old computer. I think the majority of yours did as well.
I think all of us started with like computers or laptops most of the time.
Yeah.
Best way to start.
John's home lab started on fire because it was a named Diathlon, but he had one briefly.
Mine has never caught fire, but I did have a server named Anne Frank. But let's move on. So home labs, they're really just a place that we can tinker with software, tinker with hardware during our process of learning, right? And so many people who get into the industry, a lot of my students ask me the same questions. Oh my God. A lot of students ask me the same questions of, do I have a home lab? And the answer is yes. And I recommend anyone who's getting into the industry to have a home lab to play around with. So definitely.
Even as a poor college kid, you can download some open VMware, or not VMware, open VM software and make one on your machine.
He used the V word, guys.
Yeah.
Don't use that word again.
You need a virtual machine. Get started somewhere. Start.
Yeah, definitely. And so the evolution of home labs, I'm old now. I actually have a rack, a 42U rack with actual servers in it and full enterprise hardware. I'm sure half of my power bill goes to my home lab. I probably do a little too much. But we all started with the old desktop, the old server, maybe even a Raspberry Pi, maybe, of our system. And oh my God. Windows 2000, Shannon? Are we really going back? At least it's not 95.
It's 2000 server.
Is it still sealed?
No.
Why? Why did you keep that?
Why is it not in the trash?
It has the license key on it, guys. It is still worth something.
Uh-huh.
Nostalgic asshole. Home labs, yeah.
This is what started my home lab life. I had to get something that would run Windows 2000 server built on NT technology.
That's funny. It's okay. My home lab's so great that my camera decides to, cut in and out. Hey, look, we're manual focusing now.
It includes 10 client access licenses, also known as CALs.
Yeah, we're not getting into Microsoft licensing again. Nobody wants to talk about that.
No one understands it. Not even
Microsoft. Exactly. Anyway, I think most of us started with an old laptop and an old desktop. And so, brief history of our home labs. I know mine started off as an old desktop. Most of the time it was AMD driven. Thank you very much, Shannon. But they work just fine for me. But nowadays, you can get into other different pieces of hardware, right? So, have any of you played around with Raspberry Pis?
Hello, that's me.
That's on my bucket list.
Here's an older one sitting right here. Here's a Raspberry Pi 3. I think 5 just came out a couple months ago now.
I have me a Pi 5. I'm running a Discord bot off of it.
Discord bot?
Yep.
Do
All
tell
it does is taunt
about
my friend
Discord
Paul.
bot.
It's beautiful.
Never had a Pi myself, but I did give some to some interns, and we had some projects off of it. But
I like Apple Pie personally, but
my fave.
I've done like labs, but it's weird. So like my home labs that I did were less about the computer side because I wasn't trying to do servers like you all were. I was doing network labs. So I was like bringing home like, from eBay Cisco switches and configuring those and labbing different like voicemail technologies so I could do like voice over IP and stuff like that.
Nice.
So I think my home labs were a little bit different. Nowadays, I don't really home lab a lot because I don't like to have hardware. I hate it at work. I hate it at home. So, but if I do, it's going to be something small like a Pi, or I might do like some cloud, situations because I know like Google Colab, for example, gives you a good development platform for free. So there's a lot of opportunities to like take advantage of some free, or cheap, cloud situations if you're just trying to lab a specific scenario. You just don't want to leave it running forever, right?
Yeah, you went the easy route, I think, with the Cisco Home Labs. I remember days playing with GNS3 and some other software like that. It was brutal.
I still have my RS-232 to USB adapter so I could console directly in.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, those are still needed, guys. Don't you be throwing those away.
Good old rollover cables.
Unlike Windows 2000. Just get rid of that.
With 10 client access licenses on NT Technology.
Be very careful with cloud computing, though. I do highly recommend using cloud computing if you're a student or you're trying to get into it. If you're in AWS or Azure, a lot of them will give you like student access licenses where you can have so many hours for free. But be very cautious because in order to open up any of these accounts, you have to put a credit card in. So if you ever run out of credits, they will charge you.
Mm-hmm.
So
learn to set the budget.
Cautious.
Learn to set that budget first and then get started.
I think the budget is the most important piece of setting up a home lab, especially when you're dealing with cloud computing, right?
Well, and actually,
like when you're dealing with on-prem stuff, our servers, budget's not as big, but definitely with cloud computing.
If you look at like the Cloud Plus certification from CompTIA, like it just hits budgeting hard,
right?
Like because it's that important.
The first thing I do when I set up a new AWS account is go into cost management and set up a limit, set a quota. Why? Because I do not want to pay over a certain dollar amount or anything at all, right? So I make sure that it doesn't allow me to go over. It will shut my account down before it goes over. And so highly recommended, but be very cautious on it.
One thing I'll say though about home labs is I think like you shouldn't just create one just for the sake of creating one. You need to have a goal, right? Like have a specific thing in mind that you want to accomplish. Otherwise, you're just going to end up like, and this comes to the same like mentality of like buying server hardware in general is you're going to end up oversizing it because you don't know what you're going to do with it yet. And you're trying to predict what you're going to do with it. And so you're going to end up overspending or getting more than you need. But this is where like having a specific like framework of like, this is what I'm trying to accomplish here. Like that makes your home lab a lot more effective at that. And if you want to scale it out, you probably will have that flexibility when the time comes.
Yeah, I think having a goal is definitely going to be a very important task because some of us are going to get into different paths on our journey, right? Like Kenny, you were talking about getting into networking, right? Maybe you have a couple switches laying around. Maybe you just use simulated software the whole time. You don't need to have a physical switch to learn Cisco iOS, for instance, right? But if you wanted to learn how to virtualization works personally, I think having a server, an old desktop on-prem inside your house is something that I would definitely go for. So having those goals set up ahead of time before you start purchasing anything is definitely a big goal. So those initial expenses are just something that we've always think about, right? Like I like buying a lot of my hardware on eBay. This is where I get my stuff. Why? Because companies get rid of old, Nexus 5Ks or, Dell PowerEdge servers, and I can buy them up for cheap. How do you guys get your home lab gear?
I
was gonna
sneak
say
mine out of Shannon's basement when he's not paying attention.
Nah, that's where it's all going, Shannon. You thought you just lost it.
Also check with the corporation you're working with if you're working with one yet. Sometimes they'll give away some of their old equipment that's being deprecated, or like, hey, we're going to recycle this anyway. You may not get the hard drive, but you can save some on hardware and be okay with it just running slow. It's all about the learning process. It's not necessarily about, you know, how fast your home lab is going to be.
I normally take what people are throwing away. Healthcare has a strong rule against that because HIPAA, so I can't really check with my organization and take their stuff. But I have a guy. His name is Brandon. He throws shit away all the time, so I just take it, and then I create my home lab with whatever he tosses out. Or I convince my wife that I need it to future-proof our family photos. And if me spending $2,000, $3,000 to future-proof our family photo collection, she typically goes for it because she really does not want to lose those photos. But at the same time, I don't want to pay for iCloud storage fees. So my solution was to buy a $2,000, $3,000 QNAP, and that's just kind of what I go with.
Wow, I think you spent more on that QNAP than my whole home lab, but that's okay. On a whole rack. I may pay more in power, but you paid more for the actual gear.
Well,
and your cloud storage would have been cheaper.
As I told my wife, you can't put a price on photos of the family, and you don't want to buy eBay hard drives to put in your QNAP chassis and then have your RAID array go bad, because that would just destroy everything.
Oh my goodness.
Allie, if you're watching this episode, he's lying to you. Just tell him to pay for the damn cloud.
No, that comes out of the operational bucket, and I operate out of capital expenditures.
That's the budget for his home lab, guys.
What's your life cycle on that cost benefit analysis? Like 25 years to outweigh the cloud?
I bought this QNAP 13 years ago, actually, and it's still kicking. All 20 terabytes of it in my Western Digital Reds that cost like $500 a drive way back when.
Technology changes, guys. So if you're going to take anything off of this, the first thing I would think of is don't go Shannon's way unless you have a bunch of money to waste. But if you don't have a bunch of money, there are cheaper solutions for this. I like eBay. I buy servers for literally $100, $200. And what's slow for the corporation is still overkill for what I need it for in my lab.
This is true. And take pictures of your family, because you'll forget at some point when you get dementia, but you'll have the QNAP there to save your life. Oh my
goodness. All right, Shannon, I'm going to ask you first, since, you've got a wife that you have to please on this, I guess. How the hell did you tell her where you're going to put this thing in your house? Like, how did you agree on that?
Well, the QNAP is tiny. It's in an itty bitty little box. So
I know you have a lot more than a QNAP.
Well, the big stuff, it goes in Kenny's room or next to Kenny's room, so no one really hears or cares about it, except for Kenny.
The big thing is when you're buying this big enterprise hardware, something to keep in mind is it sucks power down quick.
It does.
So you do need to make sure that you're okay with this. This is part of your ongoing budget when you're building a home lab. It's not just the original gear, but if the gear itself has 3,000 watt power supplies and there's 2 of them that has to be powered at any given time, are you willing to turn off your furnace and use it as your space heater because you can't afford to pay for heat anymore?
Redirect that ducting, get it through the vents.
That's a trade-off.
I really haven't had that problem, honestly, because of the solar panel setup that I have. Because at one point I had ambitions and I thought I was going to get a hot tub. That was an adult goal of mine. And it turns out that I'm never going to see that adult goal. So it's going to power my servers in my QNAP.
For those who don't have solar panels, though, think about it. You may want to go the virtual route and download a hypervisor like Virtual PC or, I don't know, one of the other ones that I can't think of off the top. I love how nobody on this call will be like, you know what? Download this software. It's called VirtualBox, guys. It's not that hard.
And
virtual
don't forget
box.
the noise that those servers create, right? Like that can be
Yes.
very underestimated in a home environment. Like hearing it in a data center is one thing where it's drowned out by other noises. But once you hear it in like a quiet house, it's not as fun as you'd think. Not to mention those server racks, they're not small. Good luck convincing the wife that there's a good spot for that in the house.
No, absolutely. It's definitely large. And so you need to figure out what you want in a home lab. If you're going to be a sysadmin or a virtualization engineer or something in this nature, you may want to look at a couple servers, but you can get it done with not with full blown servers. You can get it done with small desktops. You can actually make a cluster out of Raspberry Pis if you want to. There's a whole bunch of cool technologies out there, and there's a lot of free software other than VMware. So VMware has shot everyone in the foot, right? Everyone's like, yeah, screw you, VMware. I like using Proxmox. Proxmox is a great tool. I use Proxmox on any bit of my gear. What's funny is when I was learning how to use Proxmox, I turned on VBox, VirtualBox, on my laptop and installed Proxmox in VBox. And guess what? It worked.
Yep.
But hey, I got to learn Proxmox along the way, and that's the whole point of a home lab. And if you don't want to pay a bunch of money for a QNAP like Shannon, somehow Shannon talks his wife into these weird things. You can use things like FreeNAS. There's a whole bunch of other tools like FreeNAS, which is a Linux distribution that is designed to set up either a SAN or a NAS setup. So there are definitely tools that you can utilize for your hardware.
Don't forget your switching gear.
Switching gear.
Although you could probably keep that pretty easy. You just get like a gig switch off of Amazon for like $40.
Yeah, the way I went with that is, as I said, I went with Nexus 5Ks, but my previous switch before that was like a Catalyst 3750 or something like that, which is just like a gig switch.
Mm-hmm.
Really, just know that this hardware is old, and if you lose power, it's going to take 30 minutes for it to boot back up. But it gave you a live environment to go play with iOS commands for your CCNA certifications or whatever you're trying to work on.
Yeah, and again, it depends on like what your goal is with your home lab, right? Like if you're trying to lab out like network configs and switch configs, yeah, you're going to need something better than an unmanaged switch from Amazon. But if your whole goal is just to have like servers connected in a network to the internet, and you're not trying to really mess with the networking side of that, like an unmanaged switch is going to do just fine in a home lab. Never recommended in an enterprise environment, but it's not bad at home.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different ways of doing it. Cisco actually has a packet tracer. It's free for anyone who wants to use it. And that will teach you everything in their virtual environment, from their switches, from their routers, from their firewalls. Do you really need to have the physical gear anymore? No. Now, if you want it because it's fun to show off to your friends, you can buy it for pretty cheap on eBay. So I know what I want for a home lab, mainly because I'm still a geek and I like to play with things. What do you guys use home labs for?
It's honestly been years for me to have a home lab, but I also benefit from the fact that because my organization is going from hybrid to more cloud-based these days, we have free resources, so I can kind of use that to test things out. So I don't really need it at home anymore. And then at home, I kind of just stream everything. I don't really want to deal with a QNAP or deal with an old Kodi machine and have to deal with that. I have to troubleshoot my old family and my kids' computers all the time. I don't.
What about those family pictures? I'm just kidding.
It's called the
The
cloud,
photos.
man. It's not going
One
to survive
day-
a tornado in your house. Just so
They're
you
going to
know.
get hacked, and you're going to wish that you had a home lab to back up all of your family photos to future-proof your life. But for me personally, I have the entire setup basically so that I can run stuff that I can't run at work. And what I mean by that is if I want to detonate something, I can't do it on my corporate network and play around with it and create IOCs. I need to bring it home and detonate it on my own home lab in an isolated environment so that I can sit there and watch what the payload is actually doing.
Wait, are you talking malware or explosions?
Yes.
He likes the magic blue smoke and malware.
Yeah. It reminds me of the college years when John's capacitors would pop, that smell that I would get from his
God damn
broken
it.
computers. It's hard
Those
to
weren't my
recreate
fault.
that.
Those were bad capacitors, man.
But yes, detonating malware and watching what it does. I don't want to do that on a corporate network, but I can research here. And I can also create different simulations or just play. Like recently, I set up Elk Stack and a way for me to monitor new CVEs that come out. And this is a known exploit vulnerabilities that are being used by threat actors. So basically, it's just a dashboard that I can keep up all day while I'm working, and it will refresh for me every 10 seconds or whatever duration I want to.
What happens when that malware gets to your QNAP?
It won't. It's future proofed.
Bye-bye, family pictures. I've actually completely switched gears. I stopped using my home lab for these work experimentation crap because I've already learned most of that. What I'm using my home lab for now is getting off my dependence of Alexa and Google and these other things and starting to bring in a lot of those services in-house. And so I've been playing with tools like Casa OS. If you've never played with it, it is a really cool OS. It's basically a Kubernetes installation containerized system that you run in your Proxmox server. And then if you want a Plex server, it's like 3 clicks. And now you've got a Plex server where you can house all of your virtual videos, watch a lot of free streaming, stuff like that. Casa also has a free NAS plugin where you can back up all your family pictures. Why not? And then other things like pfSense. I love pfSense. I use pfSense instead of a traditional router because it's 100% like an enterprise system, right? I actually can have a VPN directly into my home network versus not having full access into my network, right? I use everything as a VPN. So even when I'm out and about, I'll VPN into my home network to surf the internet rather than use like open networks. It just seems safer to me. And at least I know that network, right? I know this network. And so it's just the way I use my home lab today.
You bring up a good point in the sense of one of the things that we talk about a lot is how dangerous like IoT devices can be. And so by like essentially transforming that into your own product or your own platform where you can contain it, etc., without having to worry about, their proprietary code or whatever it may be, like that's a good way to kind of keep your family safe. And I could see you using things like, I'm not sure exactly which platform, but I'm sure you could use an open source platform to even replace like video surveillance or, the
Mm-hmm.
Ring doorbell, for example, right? Like you could find a way to essentially do that without being a slave to Bezos.
Absolutely. I still use Ring for my external cameras, but all my internal cameras are not housed anywhere. They're housed for myself and they're uploaded to my own cloud services whenever I need to. Now, with that said, there are a lot of cool things you can do with it. You were just talking about getting off of different tools. I actually created a Olama LLM for my home use. So instead of talking to Alexa, I actually talk to Jarvis. I am a geek like that, so I called it Jarvis. And Jarvis then talks to my Olama models and answers me just directly. I don't have to use the internet. I don't need the internet for my LLM to work.
What was wrong with Edith?
Jarvis is cooler than Edith.
What was wrong with Friday?
I don't like Friday either. She was kind of gimmicky and she had bugs.
What was wrong with Ultron?
He destroyed Jarvis, so I had to back up Jarvis for him. Okay.
What was wrong with
Are
Vision?
we done with this now? All right. I think what I like to end this home lab conversation on is a little bit of the challenges and the realities of having a home lab, and something that a lot of people don't think fully through until they click buy now on eBay. And they get this monstrosity of a server and go, oh shit, what do I do with this?
Yeah, it's funny you said that because I was going to say the maintenance of your home lab sounds like a lot of work, John. How do you upkeep all those things that you're currently running?
I ignore my family.
It's a solid effort.
I have kids that I'm training to maintain my hardware.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put about it. I call them my slaves, but whatever. And then they said, we're not slaves. I said, okay, you're, people with jobs, if you get the reference. Moving on. But yeah, it does take a lot of extra time and effort. So if you want to make sure that your home lab is secure and it's going to be publicly facing like mine is, then you probably should have it patched and protected and make sure that things are going to be okay. Kind of like what Shannon said, when those hard drives fail, you are the sysadmin now. So who's going to come fix it? Who's going to replace those drives? Who's going to spend the money and hide it as, I don't know, capital expenses? Is that what you called it, Shannon?
CapEx and OpEx.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're going to hide it under CapEx so that the wife doesn't find out about it.
She does the bills now. I'm screwed.
It's depreciated by now anyway.
It has.
I think the biggest thing too is like you'll end up Googling more than you want to admit. I think it's where we've all started.
Yep.
You'll get a new piece of hardware. It's not new, it's used. So how do you clear the configuration, bring it back to a working order and get it working in your home lab to begin with? It takes a lot of Googling because you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think that's just something that I love in a home lab. I love tinkering with a piece of gear because that's kind of my own personal hit, you know, when it gets working. I'm excited. Adrenaline hit and endorphin hit of going, yay, it's working. Right?
So my fear, I know you get a lot of your stuff off of eBay, and the thing that has drove me away from that is I think people are douchebags. I think they're inherently douchebags because I know I'm a douchebag. So have you ever bought anything and you get it and you're all excited for it, and then you found out that the onboard RAID controller doesn't work?
Yeah, absolutely. But they've always worked with me. Most of the e-waste recyclers out there, when you get rid of something, all they do is turn around and sell it to somebody else. They don't e-waste it. Mm-hmm. What they do is they take the hard drives out and they sell it to somebody else with no hard drives. And then I buy hard drives on eBay that are probably not new.
Side note, have you ever done forensic work on those hard drives?
I have not, but that would have been fun because I bet you there's some fun stuff on there. My last switches came from an elementary school, by the way, just so you know. So how do I know? They never wiped them. I turned it on and it was still had their config on it. So definitely maintenance and upkeep that has to worry about it. You do need to worry about electricity costs and cooling requirements. These things do run hot. And so if you're in a southern facing state, Texas or Arizona or Florida, you may need to crank the AC even more for that room or wherever this gear is. So keep in mind, if you're going to go full-fledged enterprise, it's not just the gear, it's going to be the cooling and the power as well. But there are way smaller labs that you can get away with. As I said, even a Raspberry Pi, I can do so much with. Don't go enterprise.
I want to call out one other thing that we were talking about. Like when it comes to like maintenance and upkeep, we're talking about failures, we're talking about updates. One of the things we haven't talked about is documentation. And like we talk about that in work, and that sucks, and nobody likes doing it, and it's always a problem. But imagine yourself dealing with a failure, and Shannon, you've got to rebuild your Elk server, and you don't remember what you did. Now you got to do it again. Like you need to write your stuff down, guys.
That's the magic of a home lab, though. For me, it's like, well, I figured out once, I could do it again.
So an old man once told me that repetition with constant variation will leave you in everlasting misery. But I think the same is true with learning. So if you get to redo something multiple times, it's really going to stick in your head.
I think if your goal with your lab is learning, yeah, that's great. But I think if your goal is to run your home like it is with John, you're going to want to write that stuff down probably, especially if you need, like, what if something happens to you and now like your wife or your kids have to take over managing it or configuring it or fixing something because you're in the hospital or whatever, right?
You think my wife wants to run an elk stack?
No,
she's looking for those family pictures.
I'm talking about John's lab, not yours.
She can't even run the family recipe book. What makes you think that she's going to run the elk stack down in the basement?
Yeah. If something happened with me, I bet you she'd go straight to Walmart, pick up the cheapest router she can find, and plug it into the fiber. Why? Because that's how she got it running again. No, everything else I had, it was garbage. Who knows? Who knows where that ended up? But it's definitely something to think about. Is like how deep do you want to get into this? Because trust me, when the Wi-Fi does die because your pfSense died or your DNS server died or your ad blocker died or whatever you're using in your home lab, your wife's going to be pissed that she can't watch her TV show.
Yep.
I mean, that happens
So-
now, and I am barely utilizing my home lab for that type of scenario. How many different things do you have to go power cycle in order to get your entire network and home lab back up and running when the power
lot.
fails? Yeah.
A lot. No one can do it but me. They just turn off their Wi-Fi and they use their cell phones because I'm the only one that can fix it.
That's how
But-
I do it, and I don't even have a lab.
But anyway, if you're trying to get into this industry, I do highly recommend that you look into a home lab. It doesn't have to be full enterprise. It doesn't have to be only in the cloud. It could be somewhere in between. Hell, if you just want to learn Python, a Raspberry Pi is great for that. You don't need to have a full system, or even just putting in VBox on your laptop and running a couple virtual servers is definitely a great way to learn. So that is my tip of the day on home labs.
My tip
Back
is
to you,
start
Josh.
small. Start small.
Have an idea. Run with it. With scissors. Clean it up.
And this is not an ad. We're not sponsored by any of these people.
Yeah, but we would gladly take your money if you want to give it to us. All right. So that's our final tip. So I hope you enjoyed this episode all about home labs. If you liked, please subscribe, share with your friends, and ask us questions in the comments down below.
Show your mom.
Or your mom, that's fine. Whoever needs it. I've been Cyber signing off. Bye-bye.
Bye.